Hello everyone. Today we will discuss the various important sources of education that R.W. Emerson has described in the American Scholar, or the various influences that operate on the mind of the scholar. The first important source of education is nature. It has great educative influence on the spirit of the scholar. Every day the sun shines, and when the sun has set, the stars appear in the sky. Ever the wind blow, ever the winds blow, and ever the grass grows. The scholar is he of all men who is attracted most of all by the scenes and sights and the phenomena of nature. What is nature to him? There is neither a beginning nor an end to the mysterious continuity of this web of God. It is always circular power returning into itself. Slowly the mind finds how to join two things and see in them one nature. Then three, then 1,000, and so the mind goes on tying things together and discovering that contrary and remote things cohere and issue from one stem. The scholar soon learns that since the dawn of history, there has been a constant accumulation and classification of facts. But classification only means that the objects of nature are not chaotic, but have a law which binds them together and is also a law of the human mind. Thus he becomes conscious of unity in diversity, which is nature's law. Soon the scholar realizes that nature is the opposite of his soul, answering to it part for part. One is seal and the other is print. The beauty of nature is the beauty of his own mind. Her laws are the laws of his own mind. Nature then becomes to him the measure of his own attainments. So much of nature as he does not know and does not understand, so much of his own mind he does not yet possess. The second, the ancient precept, know thyself, and the modern precept, study nature, become at last one maxim. The second great educative influence on the spirit of the scholar is the mind of the past. The mind of the past is expressed in literature, in art, in institutions, etc. Books are the best type of the influence of the past, and it is necessary that this particular influence is considered in some detail. The theory of books is noble. In the beginning, man looked at the world around him and thought upon it. Then he gave it a new arrangement in his own mind and expressed his conclusions in his books. Books are thus a record of the immortal truths discovered by scholars of the past. But nobody is perfect. No artist can entirely exclude the conventional, the local, or the temporary from his book. Nobody can write a book of pure thought which will be as useful in all respects for the coming generations as it is for his own generation. It is wrongly supposed that books have an authority for all times, and so men begin to worship books. But each generation must write its own books, which can be of value at the most for the next generation. Submissive young men grow up in colleges and libraries, believing it their duty to accept the views which Cicero, Locke, and Bacon have expressed in their books. These young men do not realize that Cicero, Locke, and Bacon were themselves only young men in libraries when they wrote those books. The result of this worship of books is that we get the bookworm instead of men thinking, that we get the book learned class who value books as such and not as related to nature and to the human constitution. Books thus come to be regarded as a kind of third estate with the world and the soul being the other two. That is how we get the bibliomaniacs of all kinds. Books are the best of things well used, but they are among the worst of things if misused. The right use of books is to derive inspiration from them. That will be their right use. The one valuable thing in the world is the active soul. This active soul should not be allowed to become the slave of the ideas contained in books. The active soul sees truth, speaks truth, and also creates truth. Books are meant for the scholar's idle time. In his busy time, when he can directly read God, he should not waste his precious time in reading what others have written. Books are certainly a source of great pleasure. The poetry of men like Chaucer, Marvell, and Dryden affords much pleasure. Books should not be underestimated, but it is wrong to confine one's attention to books only. Books should be read in a creative, discriminating manner. One should, for instance, read only the authentic portions of the books of Plato or Shakespeare, What is not authentic in those authors must be rejected. The active soul, the genius, looks forward to the future and not backwards. Books are backward looking, but the active soul of genius is forward looking. However, it should be remembered that a genius can cause much harm also by over influence. This is seen in the fact that the English dramatic poets have Shakespeareized now for 200 years, with the result that the growth of English drama has been hampered and retarded. Freedom from servile imitation of such men of genius is also essential. Human mind can be fed by the knowledge contained in books, but the reading of books must be a creative one. One must be an inventor to read well. However, the basic principles or elementary facts can be acquired only by a careful and precise study of books. History and science must be read laboriously, and elements of the subjects must thus be acquired. Action is the third important source of education for the scholar. Emerson points out that it is wrong to suppose that the scholar should be a recluse, a kind of invalid unfit for any handwork or public labor. The so-called practical men mock at a scholar, as if a scholar can only speculate or see, but can do nothing is practical. This view needs to be corrected. A scholar must also be a man of action. Action may have secondary importance for him, but it is essential. Without action, the scholar is not yet a man. Without action, his thoughts can never ripen into truth. Inaction or inactivity is a sign of cowardice, but there can no true scholar without a heroic mind. The true scholar never misses an opportunity for action. To him, every opportunity of action that is lost means a loss of power. Action is the raw material out of which the intellect molds its splendid products. He who devotes his total strength to action obtains the richest return of wisdom. Action is a kind of diction. Action and events of childhood are the raw materials for future creation. His time is well spent if it is spent in village labors, in town, in the study of trades and manufacturers, in frank conversations with many men and women, in science and in art. The object in all these cases is to master a language through which to express his perceptions. But the final value of action, like that of books, is that it is a resource. When an artist has exhausted his materials, when the fancy no longer paints, when thoughts are no longer clearly formed, and when books become tiresome, he has always the resource to live. A great soul will be strong to live as well as strong to think. When the scholar finds it difficult to impart his truths, he can still fall back on this powerful resource of living. Living these truths is a total act, while thinking is only a partial act. A welcome development is that the dignity and necessity of labor are being recognized. There is a great merit in manual labor, both for the learned as well as for the unlearned. Labor is everywhere appreciated. Always we are invited to work, and we should not hesitate to work with our hands, subject only to one condition, that we should not, for any consideration, sacrifice our own opinions to the popular judgments and modes of action. In short, there are three sources available for the education of the scholar: nature, books, and action. Thanks for watching and listening to the video.